Okay, everyone, we're going to go ahead and get started. Thank you so much for coming to the talk. The title of the talk today is Click Here to End the World, Navigating the Vulnerability Hype Cycle. So just a quick intro. My name is Jonathan Rogers. I work as a cybersecurity analyst and awareness specialist. If you care about my social, they're up there. Please connect with me. So just a quick overview of the agenda today. We're going to first talk about what a vulnerability hype cycle is and how we get there. We're going to talk about an example about a time when I got stuck in that hype cycle. Then we'll talk about where to start. How do we assess vulnerabilities and assess the threat they could cause? How do we translate that to risk for our business and for our organization? Then we'll talk about some helpful resources on this topic. So, when I started in cybersecurity as a noob, trying to figure out this whole cybersecurity thing and trying to transition into cybersecurity, I had some thoughts. And the thoughts I had was, number one, I know attackers are going to attack. I thought, number two, I'm going to have to deal with some alerts. Number three, we're going to make some improvements. Hopefully security gets better. That should be the goal of any security program. Goal of any security program, too, we should mature the security culture in our organization. And then I thought, I'll have to deal with some vulnerabilities, but not too many. That was a cute thought. Because the fact was, I learned I was wrong. I had to deal with a lot more vulnerabilities on a daily basis than I really thought I'd have to deal with. And I was in this mad dash all the time. There was a new vulnerability, oh crap. New vulnerability, oh crap. And I'm trying to figure out all the time, what do I do? Now, I'm a numbers guy. I like to know statistics. Is this just me being an idiot thinking everything's the world ending? Or are there a lot of vulnerabilities happening out there? Well, let's look at some numbers around vulnerabilities. First of all, Mandiant reported for last year there were 55 exploited 0 days. That number was down from 2021, but it's still triple of what it was in 2020. Coalition, which is a cybersecurity insurance company, they did what cybersecurity insurance companies do, tried to protect their bottom line. They estimated for 2023 that there was going to be a total of 1,900 CVEs per, and I'm sorry, I didn't type that out correctly. It should be per month in 2023. If you go to cvedetails.com right now and look at what the total is for 2023, as of today, I looked this number up, it is 6,994. You divide that by 3 because we're still in March. That comes out to over 2,000. So we are above that 1,900 mark right now. So the numbers show we as security professionals are dealing with a lot of vulnerabilities on a regular basis. Now the question though, what do I do and how do I deal? And really, I'm a visual guy, I like to visualize things, and how this happens when we get vulnerabilities, a lot of time you get an alert like this. Oh, there's a vulnerability. Oh crap, there's another one. Microsoft, what the crap are you doing? Oh, there's another Fortinet vulnerability. Oh God, crap. And now I've got to investigate these, try to figure out what's going on. I've got people freaking out because they've seen the news that the hackers are going to break in and destroy everything. What do we do? And they're reaching out to me, so now I have to figure out what do I do with this vulnerability. And surprisingly, the world keeps turning, and I have other things to do besides dealing with vulnerabilities that are important to the security of my organization. And then I've got leadership looking at me saying, what do we do about these vulnerabilities? So I've got to figure out, how do I handle these vulnerabilities? And with all this vulnerability-related stress, sometimes, at least in my mind, this pop-up should probably appear. Because I'm overloaded, I'm stressed out. How do I handle all these vulnerabilities? Let's talk about an example of how this happened to me. Some of you will probably remember this. Last October, 2022, the OpenSSL team pre-released a vulnerability, because apparently that's a thing now. And they came out and said, and I wish they wouldn't have because it freaked me out. They said, oh, there's a vulnerability we're going to disclose, and I think it was 2 weeks on a Tuesday, and it's a critical vulnerability. And I was battening down the hatches because in my mind, this is another heartbleed. This is going to be the end of the world. Oh, crap. So I was a lot like this. Well, then the vulnerability was released, and they downgraded one of the vulnerabilities, and then I was like this. But here I was stuck in this hype cycle, just freaking out because, there's this vulnerability. What do we do about it? How do we handle it? And then I realized something. If I keep living like this, I'm going to die of an aneurysm. How do I handle all these vulnerabilities? That's the question we've got to answer, is how do we handle these vulnerabilities? Because the fact of the matter is, how we deal with vulnerabilities as an information security professional has the potential to make or break us. And you say, Jonathan, you're just being hyperbolous. No, I'm not. Because numbers show, Threat Connect did a survey last year and found that 27% of information security professionals were actively thinking about quitting their job on a regular basis. And this shows, and now I know not all that's stress because of vulnerabilities. I wouldn't dare suggest that. But it shows that as information security professionals, we're under a lot of pressure. And some of that is because of vulnerability. So how do we handle them? Well, what I want to really get into is how I've, for myself and my organization, have defeated this vulnerability hype cycle and ask meaningful questions that help us figure out if a vulnerability is real bad, or not a worry. So the first thing you need to do is start with the right questions. The questions to start with are super important. So the questions I like to start with when I see a vulnerability is, number one, are we affected? Now, I know this seems like a stupid question to even ask, but sometimes it's harder to answer that question than we think, because what about something like Log4j? How many of you knew what Log4j was and if you had it in your environment before December of 2021? Our people didn't. So sometimes, and a lot of times, this is the key question to answer to figure out, are we affected by this vulnerability? And if we are, where's it at? How bad is it? Is this vulnerability, the second question I start with is this vulnerability being publicly exploited? Because that can really play into my decision of how urgent a thing is. Because if it's just theory, nobody's publicly exploiting, maybe we don't patch it as urgently. But if people are popping it left and right and we're vulnerable, then maybe we take everything down, patch this immediately. My third beginning question that I start with is how mission critical are the affected systems? So, is this system something that is used for a really low-level thing? Or is this a vulnerable firewall firmware? Is this something that could, if an attacker exploited this vulnerability, it could cause a total compromise of our environment? That's one of the key questions I have to ask when I get a vulnerability and think about, because that'll really help me figure out how big of a deal a vulnerability is. So we start with the right questions. Then we have to really assess the technical impact of a vulnerability. And this is where the nerd in me really rejoices, because I love looking at what a vulnerability entails and how it can be exploited. And that's why I got into hacking and cybersecurity in the first place, because that just really excites me to figure out how we can take this thing that really doesn't seem dangerous and exploit it and do some pretty cool stuff. So when we look at this, the first thing I ask is there a public POC? Because maybe it's not publicly exploited yet, but there is a POC available, and people are going to figure out how to do this. How difficult is the vulnerability to exploit? This is a big one for me, because we run a certain brand of firewall that probably won't be hard for some of you to guess, and this brand of firewall this year has had, all throughout their brand, 60 vulnerabilities. And there was one that came out a couple weeks ago that was a read-write vulnerability. And my boss was a little nervous about it, and he still a little nervous about it. And he asked me, he's like, is this a big deal? Would this, could they own our firewalls if they exploited this? And I read the disclosure and was going through thinking about it. When I read it, there was a key phrase that I looked at that said, to exploit this, the attacker must be on the firewall. Well, if the attacker's already on your firewall, you're already in trouble. So this is a question that can really help us, because if they've got to be on the firewall or on the endpoint, then it helps us figure out really where this vulnerability lies at and how dangerous it is to us and our organization. What's the skill level required to exploit this vulnerability? Is this something that's going to take an APT to do? Or can any kid with an internet connection and PowerShell figure this out? One of my key questions that I ask is, if this vulnerability was exploited, how bad would my day suck? Because some vulnerabilities, if they're exploited, yeah, my day would be kind of bad, but I could still go get ice cream later and it'd be okay. But some vulnerabilities, if they're exploited, don't talk to me, don't look at me, don't touch me. Because it would be how bad? Real bad. And this is one of the key questions that I have to ask, because if I just go straight to the freak out, it's not going to help anybody, myself included. But if I ask, well, how bad would this be if this was exploited? How bad would it make my day? Then I can really hone in and figure out, oh, this wouldn't be this bad, or, yeah, this could be a really bad deal for us. Some other questions we can ask, and I'm going to kind of go through these fast, but some other questions we can ask. We don't have to ask these all the time, but these are some as I'm thinking through vulnerabilities that I'll ask at times. Does it allow for a remote code execution? Is it a zero-click vulnerability? Is the vulnerability automatable? Does it allow for network access? Does it help the evasion of security controls? Really what we're trying to do when we judge the technical impact is figure out the blast radius. If this vulnerability is popped, how bad would it be? That's what technical impact has to be about, is us judging if this is a big deal or not a big deal. And really, this can be where we shine a lot of light on a situation and a vulnerability to understand what it could do potentially to us and our organization. Now, we start with key questions. We look at the technical impact. But the fact we have to know as cybersecurity professionals is that those first two things that we're thinking about, the first three questions, looking at the technical impact, when we talk to leadership about those things, they're probably not going to give a crap about those things. They will look at, if you go do leadership and you say, if this vulnerability is exploited, an attacker will get remote code execution. What are most leaders going to look at you and say? Is that bad? And it's not like making fun of them. That's not what they get paid to think about. It's not what they've learned. They just don't understand what that is. So what we have to ask ourselves is, what does leadership care about? What do the executives at your organizations and at my organization, what do they care about? What are they concerned about? And leadership is concerned about a lot of things, but one major thing, the business. So the question we have to ask ourselves ultimately when we're dealing with vulnerabilities is, what is the business impact? We've considered from the technical side, how bad would this make my day? So the question we have to go to next is to consider, how bad would this vulnerability being popped be for our business? Because the fact is, if you go to your leadership team and you say, if this vulnerability is exploited, it will cause a total shutdown of the company, we will not be able to make money, and we will be down for at least blah, blah days. I guarantee they'll probably look at you and say, do what you got to do. Why? Because you've taken a vulnerability, which is this kind of vague thing that they don't really understand, and you've now made it make sense to them. You've translated it to business impact. That's what they care about. But not only does leadership care about business impact, as security professionals, we should too. I know I really nerd out and I care about the technical stuff, I care about the protections, but ultimately my goal should be to protect the business. Why? Because if the business ceases to exist, I'm looking for a job. And that's what we were hired to do, is take care of the security of the business. This has to be one of our top drivers. And I know sometimes we can get there and we get in this kind of monotony where it gets old. But we have to remember why we're there and what we've been hired to do. We've been hired to keep the business safe, to keep leadership informed, and ultimately keep our end users protected. Now, do you want to mention some helpful resources that are out there? The first one is by Paul Asadorian. He really walks through not only the hype cycle and how it really occurs, but he talks about more how vulnerabilities turn into what we would call forever days. The second one is a lot of the questions I've talked about. It's a really good article. The third one is another good article just talking about that. The fourth thing I do want to mention, I want to spend a brief moment on. If you've not looked at or considered the CISA Stakeholder-Specific Vulnerability Categorization Guide, I'd highly, if you are in charge of vulnerability management at your org, I would highly recommend you take a look at that. That is a really good guide. I know that's kind of shocking. CISA put out something good, but they've been doing better these days. It's like Monty Python, they got better. So check that out. One thing in there that I would encourage you to look at is, I know a lot of us are visual people, and one of the things in there is something I'll show you next. This may be hard to see, but it is in that guide. This is a flow chart where you start with the vulnerability, you go through, answer the questions, and then it will help you quantify how bad that vulnerability is. This is a really good chart. This can be really, really helpful for you and your organization. This can be a good way, if you don't have a way, if you're me and my teammate that's here, if you're a small team in cybersecurity that's handling cybersecurity for your org, this can be really helpful to help you figure out what's going on and help you protect your org. So wrapping it up, vulnerabilities are going to happen. We can get stuck in this vulnerability hype cycle, but we can also defeat it. How do we defeat it? We ask the right questions, we determine the technical impact, and we translate the vulnerability to real business risk and impact. Thank you all for attending today. Got 6 minutes if anybody has any questions. If not, thank you all.